Ed Carball and Matt Hawkins here with Coast to Coast Combat Hour. Our guest this week is the legendary Chad George of California MMA. Is it California MMA and Fitness, your gym?
Yeah, that's close enough. CMMA, California Mixed Martial Arts, both of them work.
And you have you're going to be the first featured fighter on FITE TV's Life of a Fighter. It's like a docuseries, and that's what we're here to talk about. So thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So why don't you break down? I mean, depending on what our time frame looks like, I might ask you about some of your fighting history, just being a fan. Yeah, but why don't you get into this documentary? I saw it posted on your Instagram. It looks like it works your way through your fight career. Why don't you tell us as much about it as you can?
Well, so there was a documentary that was made about me several years back. I don't know if you guys caught it. It was called Occupation Fighter, and it was an amazing film about an athlete that was trying to make it in the sport that was dealing with tons of adversity that I had to deal with. And the film sparked a lot of amazing feedback from people around the world. And as my career kind of really became a career after that, this last fight that I had, I retired in 2019, was the end of my career. And a lot of people said they wanted to doc, at least my people in my community really wanted to bring it all together, because my story is no different than anybody else in regards to that. I'm just a person that's nobody special who kept fighting. I've had to deal with things my entire life, my entire career, and I just kept going, and I was able to make a career out of this. And this story is what we were able to tell with this new documentary, Life of a Fighter. And it deals with not only my evolution going as a fighter and a transition into me as a coach. We also get introduced to other athletes that are going through the same process that I was going through. We've got guys that are using this as a way of overcoming addiction. We have guys that are using this that are crossing the country, living out of their car. You know, these are all things that I know very well. And we also touch on the mental health side of things that is not talked about enough, and not only in combat sports, but in sports, period.
You know what? That's it. I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because that's something I remember at the beginning of the pandemic. I spoke with he passed away, actually, Sergio Da Silva. He passed away towards the end of last year, and that's something he and I talked about when I interviewed him just literally at the peak of the pandemic, about just because we were all, no one could train, you know, everybody was suffering mentally and stuff like that. Which brings me to my question to you. You know, you fought your last fight in 2019, and then you're focusing on training and coaching all these guys. Everything you just talked about, you probably had to double time it to help all these guys with everything that just happened. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Now when you're saying everything that just happened, you mean like with the pandemic?
The pandemic, yeah.
Well, throw it also. I also had a kid during the pandemic. So
oh, wow.
My
Congrats.
wife and I had a thing. We had our son Logan, who was born right in the middle of it in May. So, you know, going through trying to figure out if my gym's going to survive. I've got guys that I'm coaching that are traveling around the country. So I've been traveling with them, trying to figure out how to do this parenting thing, raising a kid, and while trying to deal with the stresses of like everything that I have going on in my life as well. And so, you know, trying to jumble everything together with no playbook was hard. It's still hard. You know, every day is that challenge. But I think what's allowed me to find comfort in it is knowing that I've had to deal with uncertainties my entire life, and also throughout my entire career. I think that is what makes life. It's overcoming the uncertainties. It's overcoming the things that you didn't have an answer to, and then realizing like, holy shit, I did that. And that gives you the confidence to reach out and face the next challenge that's in front of you. And, you know, that's what we've been dealing with this whole time. You know, I've got my athletes just trying to keep them in the gym during this, you know, like, hey guys, I need you to go for a run. Why? There's no fights. Well, because it's not about having a fight. It's about adopting the lifestyle. And so we've had to try to create these guys to become not just fighters, but adopt the lifestyle of what it means to be a fighter. And that's something that I didn't understand until years later into my career.
You know, you mentioned years later in your career. Now, looking back at your record, for me, it was kind of fun because while I didn't get to go to all your fights, I recognize a lot of the names you fight, the Shad Smiths, the bunch of these guys that were kind of around the Indian reservation scene in the early 2000s. How do you think? You got into this about 23 or so, your first fight. so you grew up, you came out of high school kind of during the wild west of California MMA. How do you think being a part of it from that point to where we're at now, where while there's obviously slowed down due to the pandemic, but MMA has exploded to a scene that I imagine I couldn't have imagined it back then. I don't think you probably could have either, where we're at now. How has that helped you in coaching as far as explaining to everybody the different things that can happen along the way?
Well, I look at it this way. I mean, come on. I fought on the very first sanctioned event in California. So, I mean, when I first started, it wasn't even legal here. My very first fight, we talked about it a little bit, that it was in Tijuana, Mexico. I had to go to Mexico and fight because it wasn't legal. You know, so these guys have such an opportunity now. And even back then, we didn't know how to train. We were just trying to figure this thing out. We're like, I think this is how you train for a fight. What do? Well, let's put on gloves. Let's beat each other up every day as much as we can, because I think that's how you get ready for a fight. Let's whoop each other's ass. That's the only thing we can think of. And then we talked to other gyms, and that's what they were doing, so it seemed right. Mm-hmm. Now, the evolution of what this thing has gotten with the higher level coaching, the guys that have been through it, that understand what to do, what not to do. So the guys that are like, I can say it now, or my era, are the ones that are emerging, in my opinion, to be the coaches that are going to help boom the technical side of the sport to something that we can't even understand right now. I mean, I've got some 18, 19-year-old kids in my gym that I'm thankful I'm done fighting. You know, I'm serious.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that you're saying that. My instructor said something the other day. He's like, you know, when you're training guys in jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts and stuff, it's the only martial art discipline where you're teaching your students to eventually beat you one day.
That's it. Yes, and I did a thing the other day, and they're like, well, what happens when, you know, your student beats you? I'm like, I hope they do. I hope I get tapped. I hope that they are able to catch me. Why? Because that means I'm doing my job. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to sit here and ride my own ego. I'm done fighting. Of course, I still, you know, I got to get on the mat and, you know, remind them sometimes, you know, like, you know, what's going on. But I'm very strategic of that. I wait to the very end of practice when they're tired. And then I jump in and I'm like, see, coach still got it.
Yeah. No, try. It's guilty as charged too as a 45-year-old grappler. But one of the things I wanted to ask you was, you know, I remember they featured you over at Lights Out when you were fighting your last fight, and now you have this thing coming out on FITE TV on Friday. What does it make you feel when you're approached about, like, we want to feature your story? Like, do you even, you know, because you were the last time I talked to you when I interviewed you for Sure Dog. I mean, you were very selfless. Like I mean, you made this move obviously because you wanted to help everyone you just mentioned, your students and all these up and coming fighters. So what's your initial reaction when they're saying, hey, we want to do a feature on you?
I think it's awesome. You know, like when we talked before, for me, fighting has given me a platform to be able to help people. You know, it's allowed me to find who I am. It's allowed me to walk around with confidence. It's allowed me to understand that, like, everything that I've gone through in my life has allowed me to become the man I am today. And the fact that my story gets to get out there and help more people, it's heartwarming. I mean, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to be able to reach out to as many people and let them know that, listen, I'm nobody special. I'm just a guy that decided not to give in to all the bullshit. And if I can do it, so can anybody else. And, you know, this film coming out like this is exactly the proof of it.
Does it have footage going back years and years, or is it mainly your stories? Or do you have all the old footage?
Believe it or not, it's got little bits of almost all of it. So when you watch the documentary, they touch on a little bit of my history. They touch on all these things. So you're going to learn who I am, what I've gone through a little bit. And then it's going to transition into me becoming the coach while preparing for my last fight, dealing with a lot of injuries that I've had for most of my career. Certain new things pop up. And then we also have some tragedy happen as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing, you know, as somebody that covers the sport, interviews a lot of fighters and seeing what they go. I just mentioned Sergio, and you talked about the stuff that you went through. You know, I feel like sometimes when as big as mixed martial arts has become, it's almost like folks kind of forget that, you know, all you fighters are still human beings. And it's rare that we get to see an inside look that you're giving us on FITE TV. But I got a question talking about evolution and of the way the game has evolved and stuff like that. Do you ever find yourself, I don't want to say shaking your head, but Like when people talk about the new hot technique of the week or whatever, you get guys that get into leg locks and things like that. Like now in MMA, it seems like the calf kick has become very popular. I mean, what's you've fought like 15 years. That's not really a new move to you, right?
No, I mean, listen, all this stuff's been around. It's just now people are utilizing it more. I'm a huge fan of the sport still. I mean, I obsess on it. I watch all these things. This weekend, I fly out to Missouri. I've got one of my athletes fighting for the LFA world title. So we study. So all the things that we see on TV, I mean, I look at it all the time. So it's about, yes, it's been around, but now people are emphasizing it, right? It's just like certain things, like maybe a certain choke is the flavor of the week that everybody's really hooked on. So it just, you got to see what people are using, and then you can understand the way that gym is training. And that's the way you start analyzing, who your opponents are and what you're getting ready for. It's not just the technique. You have to look at how they train as a collective. And then you can start getting inside the mindset of the way they're training to beat us.
So going back in your history a little bit, you were a wrestler, correct? And then you transitioned. Who did you get trained for? Who was your instructor for jiu-jitsu, and when did you decide to take the step and into MMA?
It was the stupidest decision I had ever made in my life. I was coming out of college doing a bunch of drugs and things that were not healthy for me. And I was trying to find a wrestling gym because I'd wrestled my whole life. And I had zero desire of getting into MMA. I mean, you got to remember, we're talking 2003, 2004, where MMA was nothing like what it is right now. And I remember a buddy told me that, I could find a wrestling gym, but this is when they pulled the funding from all the colleges. So there was no wrestling programs anywhere. I couldn't get a gym just to go work out in, and lifting weights has always been next to death to me. Like I cannot stand just lifting weights and running on an elliptical. I can't do it. So a buddy of mine that I worked on a project with, I was in art and film school, told me about this jiu-jitsu program, and a guy named Sean Choi was running it. And actually, Sean is still my instructor today. So I've been with him all these years. I was his first black belt. And then there was a guy named Ian that ran a program. It was like an MMA program. They were doing some stuff, and I trained with him for a while. But when it happened, the reason why I said it was the stupidest thing I'd ever done in my life, because I was still doing all my partying. I was doing all this stuff. And I think I'd been training a month and a half, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. I had never even sparred. I think I learned a guillotine, and they're like, hey, I'm just throwing it out there. Would you be interested in doing a fight? And I'm like, what do you mean a fight? And he was like, I don't know. Like, we never had this offer, but they got a guy who had an opponent drop out. He's got a little bit more experience than you, like maybe 6 months more. He's a wrestler, so it's pretty much going to be a wrestling match. And I was like a real fight? And he said, yeah. I said, I'm a college student, so I'm broke as hell. And he says, and I go, well, does it pay money? He said, yeah, it's a professional fight. And I said, no shit. And I was like, well, when is it? Let's say this conversation was on a Tuesday. And he kind of laughed, and he said, well, that's on Friday. And I go, wait, hold on. You want me to fight on Friday, a professional fight? I said, how much money? He goes, I don't know. I've never done it. I said, well, and I said, well, where is the fight? He started laughing. I said, okay, just cut to the chase. Stop laughing. He said, it's in Tijuana, Mexico. I said, so you want me to fight a professional fight? You don't know how much money, and you want me to go do it in Mexico? And he said, yeah. I said, okay, let's go. So we went to Mexico, and I made my first fight, and I got beat up for 3 rounds, and I ended up winning by mounted guillotine in the 3rd round.
Yeah, and this isn't like you're going to some sports arena in Mexico. No. This is pulling up to a nightclub called the Baby Rock that looks like a gigantic rock. And you go in, and it's like you're walking through caves. And the event I went to, they didn't even have chairs. I sat on the stairs right next to the ring.
You know what the best thing about the Baby Rock is? If you've been there, right? If you've been to the Baby Rock, it is the scene in every bad movie where somebody dies right before the person that you're watching is about to go out. That's the Baby Rock.
No, that's the one where they get stretchered out into the alley.
So
yeah, right, and then left there, and then they close the door like it didn't exist.
So how many times do you have to bring that up with the younger guys you got coming up? How many times do you have to bring that up when they're like, man, I don't want to I don't want to fight in this air conditioned, banquet hall. Like how many times do you have to say, listen, I fought in Tijuana at the place where they filmed Dusk
luckily
Till
not
Dawn.
so much anymore. Not so much anymore. We Dusk Till Dawn. That is such a good analogy. Like, geez, if I win, I still got to be here and fight the zombies. Not so much anymore. We have such a strong emphasis on the mindset and defining what your why is at my gym. I mean, I would like to think that the biggest aspect of our training is the mental work that we do here. And I know that we're one of the only few gyms that are not like one of the big name gyms that are so hyper focused on those details that I really don't have to explain it too much anymore, because the guys that are in this room, they're in the room for a reason, and they're feeding off each other's energy. And so, I mean, there are days where, I got to kick them in the ass and I got to remind them what they're there for. And, but in general, they get it, man.
I mentioned before we came on the air that I saw you at the Cage Warriors event. That's something that's going to start popping up. Tickets go on sale again tomorrow for their October show. Is there a couple fighters that you should bring to our attention of guys there that might be making a name for themselves in the Cage Warriors organization?
125-pounders Cody Davis, he just fought on Cage Warriors. So he's 3-0 now as a professional. He was 7-0 as an amateur. He was the first 3-time state flyweight champion in California. So he's a kid that's got a lot of potential. Hopefully we'll get him back on there again, but he's going to fight here at LXF in October against a real tough kid. It's going to be probably his toughest challenge. The kid's 4-1, All-American wrestler. So that's going to be a good fight. I've got a roster, guys. Believe it or not, I probably have about 40 athletes that I'm working with right now.
Wow.
Well, you mentioned LXF. I know that's where you fought your last fight, so it's nice to see that you're maintaining the relationship and helping the other guys come up. They just had their last event, last month. It was LXF 5.
Yeah, I had 2 guys on it.
That's what I was going to ask you. You had 2 guys. How did they do? I watched it, but I didn't know who they were.
Good. JJ Buckner won by split decision. It was a close fight. And then Dominic Clark won by unanimous decision. He had a tough go in the very beginning, got dropped, and I think the first punch of the fight, but then came back and dominated the round, won the round, and won 30-27 on the cards. Even with LXF, I had a lot of people that wanted to, and they all reached out that wanted to host my retirement fight. There was some of the bigger shows that were wanting it in, and it made sense for me to do it home in my backyard. Like I've been fighting in LA and for LA for so long, and I know they're fighting out of Glendale and Burbank, but it's close enough where my community is there. It made sense that's where I had to end it. It wouldn't have felt right if I did it anywhere else.
Do you foresee? Now you retired from MMA fighting. Do you foresee yourself still doing some grappling matches, or is that just going to be as stuff might come?
Say that again.
Are you planning on doing more grappling events in the future still, or is that something you're even going to shy away from to focus on coaching?
I will probably grapple till the day that I die. I'll be walking with 4 canes, and I'll find a way to get on the mat, right? Like that's something I can't live without. Competition is in my blood. I can't function without it. It's funny that I was talking to my wife because I'm done fighting, but I do believe that everybody has an opportunity. Like if there's something that makes sense down the road, I'll still be retired, but maybe I do something that makes sense. I fight a guy from my era. And like from the WEC days or early UFC days, like when it's down the road, when my son is old enough to actually appreciate, dad going and fighting, it'd be like no different than a golfer going and doing a round of golf that, people get to watch. You're still retired. I just do a fight, if it makes sense and, my body can actually get out of bed, like why not do one? But right now I'm not thinking about it. It'll be down the road if that happens and it makes sense. And my focus right now is on my athletes. I've got a lot of great up and comers that are keeping me busy. I mean, we have literally been traveling and flying from the beginning of the quarantine until, I fly out tomorrow.
Does your wife consider combat jiu-jitsu a fight?
Hey, listen, have you ever seen me do combat jiu-jitsu? That is a fight.
Oh, no, I got you. That's what I'm wondering. I just wondering how you got that definition worked out in case you need to.
I see what you mean.
To blur the lines a little bit.
I see where you're going with that. And don't tell my wife. She does consider that grappling.
Well, yeah, it is. Technically, it is. So listen, you talked about the community, and you know, you have this. You've already had the one documentary done. This feature's coming on FITE TV. I mean, when did you like? What do you credit the notoriety, the because like it seems like everyone out on the West Coast knows Chad George. If you're in mixed martial arts combat sports, you know who Chad George is, and obviously your guys. I mean, anybody you under your banner sells tickets. Like, what do you just credit that to? Is it just by being always busy and fighting all the time, or how? Like, what is it?
Honestly, I think passion is infectious. You know, because I love what I do, and I try to come in. I try to make a lasting impression with everybody that I come in contact with. It's not because I feel like I have to do that. It's like I think that's what we all need, right? We all feel good when somebody genuinely shakes your hand. We all feel good when somebody's happy to share your success. So that's all I do. Is every time I see people succeed, I cheer them on, because that's what allows us all to get through this shit together collectively. Like, we can't do anything alone. So if we're all doing this together, well, then I'm rooting you on and you're rooting me on. And all of a sudden we look around, we've got this whole army behind us. Just, it's full of positivity.
Yeah, just talking to you for 21 minutes, I can see that, because Ed mentioned your guys sell tickets and stuff. Your EBI events that I've been to, your fights, you've always had a big following in the crowd. So I can see why people are gravitate towards you. You obviously have a positive attitude, and you've been through a lot of stuff from like you said, the early days of some of the stuff you were mixed in that people can relate to, and how you got out of it. So no, that's awesome. And now I'm definitely going to walk up to you and introduce myself in person next time I see you around.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But
that's the thing. I don't want anyone, like, look, people put like quote unquote celebrities on this pedestal, right? But at the end of the day, they are just a person that's done their job. That's it. They've gotten the credibility for doing their job well. So that means that the guy down the road, I got a guy who comes and does work at my place all the time, and he is a hard worker, but nobody gives him the credit for that, except for, like, I come in, he comes, I'm always giving him extra money. I give him extra things, because we all need that validation. Like, hey, you're doing a good job. And I think that's the part of it. People are surprised that, you know, I'll go places, and I know I'm not like this superstar guy, but I get approached and people are like, oh my God, like, he's just a normal person. And it's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I had a job that punches people in the face. You sit in front of a desk. Like, you find what I do gut wrenching, I find what you do gut wrenching. Right? So, like, we both have to find ways to do jobs that other people don't want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it. There's a trailer already on the FITE TV. I'm going to drop a link in the description of this video and the audio version of this podcast. But I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I know we set it up kind of last minute, so thank you so much. I mean, you're sitting in your car doing it. Really quick, just if you want to plug your gym or any sponsorship or anything else you got going on, the floor is yours.
Awesome. No, I appreciate the support. Thanks for bringing me on and talking about the documentary. You know, my athletes at California Mixed Martial Arts, I have Bruno Sosa fighting for the LFA featherweight title on Friday night. That is on UFC Fight Pass. So that's going to be a great fight. Tough kid that we're fighting. And, you know, my biggest thing is, like, listen, if you have dreams and you goals, go for it. Who gives a shit what anybody ever tells you can or can't do? The only things that you are limited to are put on yourself. And just, we all got to fight. If there's something you want in life, go fight for it.
Awesome. I see your Instagram handle is Chad Savage George. Do you have any other social media, or is that your primary outlet?
Yeah, my Instagram is Chad Savage George. My Twitter is Savage135.
Awesome.
And
awesome.
One last question, because you were breaking up when you were talking about your one of your students fighting at the Lights Out in October. You said I only heard the last name is that Davis?
I'm sorry.
You said you have someone fighting in October for LXF. What was the name of that fighter?
Oh, we the next show. So I've got Cody Davis, who's fighting on the Lights Out card, and I think we might have 2 or 3 other athletes that we're locking in as well. Okay.
No, I just wanted to add it to my notes because I didn't. It broke up when you were talking about it. So, all right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Gotcha. Absolutely.
So, yeah, again, thanks for coming on, Chad. Everybody check out on FITE TV this Friday night, the debut of The Life of a Fighter, docuseries featuring Chad George. You can always check out our podcast at allaccessmma.com. Follow me, Matt Hawkins, at MMA Hawk 21 at MMA Hawk 21. I'm sorry, MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. Jeez, I got so many things going. Follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter, Carbeerzol on Instagram, Old Head Carb on Twitch, and you can follow the show at Combat Hour and Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Got through those okay. Chad, thank you for coming on. Appreciate your time. Look forward to meeting you in person in the near future, hopefully. Worst case, probably Cage Warriors in October.
Right on. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the time. Thanks for the support. Enjoy the rest of your day, all right?
All right, good luck to you.
All right, thanks, guys. You too.
Good night.